Hi everyone, thank you so much for the support today. We live to see another day, another round, so please come and support me tomorrow in both.
Dream since she was a kid to see her on carry the...
Buhay! Maraming salamat sa support at magkita tayo sa next round. Thank you!
The tennis world has just witnessed an unprecedented declaration of war as Mike Eala, father of the Philippines' brightest rising star Alex Eala, has filed a bombshell lawsuit against the Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open organizers, transforming what should have been a celebrated prestigious tournament into ground zero of a scandal that threatens to expose the darkest secrets of professional tennis officiating. And this isn't just another tennis controversy about bad calls, epic meltdowns, racket smashes, or heated arguments with chair umpires. This is a full-scale, legitimate, no-holds-barred legal action that could change the landscape of professional tennis forever because Mike Eala has taken the unprecedented step of filing an actual lawsuit. Not a strongly worded letter, not an angry social media post, not a complaint filed through proper channels, but a real legal action calling the officiating shameful, calling what happened to his daughter a robbery. And most explosively claiming that officials in Abu Dhabi didn't just make honest mistakes, but deliberately sabotaged his daughter's meteoric rise to undermine the integrity of the entire sport, raising questions about whether Alex Eala was specifically targeted, whether there's a hidden bias against rising stars from Southeast Asia, what this means for her future in the biggest tournaments. And most importantly, whether this lawsuit could blow the lid off systematic problems in tennis officiating that have been festering for years while the Eala fan army mobilizes. The Eala family fights back with everything they've got, and the tennis establishment scrambles in panic mode. According to multiple sources close to the Eala camp, and reports that started circulating on social media less than 2 hours ago, Mike Eala has filed formal legal action against the organizers of the Abu Dhabi Open, with the core allegation being absolutely damning: unfair officiating decisions that deliberately put Alex at a severe competitive disadvantage during a crucial match in her career trajectory. And while every professional tennis player on earth has dealt with questionable line calls and experienced the frustration of a close call going against them at a critical moment where you shake your head, mutter under your breath, maybe give the umpire a look and then move on to the next point as standard operating procedure, what we're talking about here goes far beyond a single disputed line call, because according to Mike Eala's statement, what happened in Abu Dhabi was nothing less than a systematic point-by-point dismantling of his daughter's mental state and competitive advantage during what should have been one of the defining matches of her breakout season. And here's the quote that's currently setting the tennis internet absolutely on fire with raw emotion and barely controlled fury. "This is truly shameful. They are undermining the integrity of tennis. If they do not change their decision, my daughter will suffer severe consequences. How can they treat a 21-year-old young woman who is already facing criticism from across the Philippines in this way?" And those words reveal that he's not worried about a trophy that will sit on a shelf or a single tournament's prize money, but about his daughter's entire career trajectory, her ranking points that determine which tournaments she can enter directly, her seeding at Grand Slams, and her psychological well-being, and perhaps most heartbreaking of all, he's openly acknowledging the crushing pressure that Alex is under as the undisputed face of Philippine tennis, carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire nation on her young shoulders. Understanding where Alex Eala is right now in her career is absolutely crucial to understanding why this lawsuit represents such a dramatic, desperate measure, because we're talking about February 2026 when Alex Eala is 20 years old, soon to turn 21, and she's no longer the promising junior champion with potential or the teenage prodigy that people whisper might make it someday. She is right now, at this very moment, a legitimate top-tier WTA contender who has fought, clawed, and battled her way into the top 40 of the world rankings. And think about that for a second, because the top 40 in the world out of thousands of professional players means she's in the elite group, getting direct entry into WTA 1000 events, and facing the biggest names in tennis not as a wide-eyed newcomer, but as a legitimate threat. But here's the thing that most casual fans don't fully understand. With that rise comes pressure that would crush most people, because in the Philippines, Alex isn't just another athlete competing in an individual sport. She's a national icon on billboards and in commercials where every single match she plays is watched by millions. Every victory is celebrated like a national holiday, and every loss is dissected, analyzed, criticized, and debated by millions of passionate fans and equally passionate critics on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and every other social media platform you can imagine. And her father specifically mentioned this crushing reality in his statement about facing criticism from across the Philippines. So imagine being 20 years old and knowing that every time you step on a tennis court, an entire nation is watching, judging, hopping, and yes, sometimes unfairly criticizing. So Alex enters the Abu Dhabi Open, a prestigious WTA 500 event that represents a crucial opportunity in her season where she desperately needs these ranking points to solidify her position for Grand Slam seeding, and needs the prize money to continue funding her world-class team, her travel, her training. And she fights through the early rounds with the determination and grit that's become her trademark. Battles her way to the quarterfinals where the crowd is absolutely electric, with thousands of Filipino expatriates living in the UAE packing the stands, waving flags, chanting her name, creating an atmosphere that feels like a home match despite being thousands of miles from Manila. And the energy is palpable while her doubles partnership with Janice Jin has been generating buzz throughout the tournament. And everything, absolutely everything, is lining up for a potential fairy tale run that could launch her into the top 30. But then, according to multiple eyewitness accounts and the allegations in the lawsuit, the officiating starts to turn. And if you followed professional tennis for any length of time, you've probably noticed a disturbing pattern where players from smaller tennis nations, from countries without decades of Grand Slam champions and established tennis infrastructure, often seem to get the short end of the stick when it comes to close calls, where those 50-50 line calls that could go either way somehow always seem to favor the higher-ranked seed from a traditional tennis powerhouse. Time violations get handed out to the young upstart, while the veteran player gets infinite patience and understanding. And technical malfunctions with electronic line calling systems mysteriously only seem to occur on break points against the player from the less established tennis nation. And usually these players have no choice but to swallow their frustration, maybe post a cryptic, slightly sad Instagram story with a thoughtful emoji, give a carefully worded answer in the post-match press conference about tough calls and that's tennis, and then pack their bags, get on a plane, and move on to the next tournament hoping for better luck. But not this time, because this time the Eala family has decided that enough is enough. They've drawn a line in the sand and said in the clearest possible terms that they will not accept this treatment anymore. Not just for Alex, but for every rising star from a non-traditional tennis nation who has been marginalized, dismissed, or unfairly treated by the tennis establishment. So what exactly happened on that court in Abu Dhabi? And while the full lawsuit is sealed and contains specific legal details that haven't been made public yet, insiders who were present and fans who watched the match are painting an absolutely disturbing picture, because it was a high-stakes moment in the match where the tension in the stadium was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Alex was serving, trying to hold to stay in the set, or possibly to break her opponent's momentum. She hits what appears to be a crucial shot. Fans in the stadium who had a clear view of the line insist the ball was clearly in. Multiple spectators reported seeing chalk fly up from the line, which in tennis is usually definitive proof that a ball caught the line and should be called good. But the line judge called it out, and Alex's face showed immediate confusion and disbelief as she turned to the chair umpire, clearly wanting to challenge the call. But here's where things get truly bizarre, because according to reports, either the electronic review system was mysteriously unavailable at that crucial moment, or the chair umpire immediately overruled any possibility of a challenge without proper explanation. And the look of confusion and frustration on Alex's face was visible to everyone in the stadium as she pleaded with the chair umpire, her body language clearly saying, "How is this possible?" While she pointed to where the ball landed, trying to show the mark. But the umpire was unmoved, unchanging, almost robotically refusing to even consider the possibility of an error. And according to the lawsuit and eyewitness accounts, it didn't stop there, because reports suggest there were wildly inconsistent applications of the time violation rules, where while Alex's opponent was apparently allowed to take extended breaks, toweling off leisurely, walking slowly back to the baseline, taking time to adjust strings and bounce the ball repeatedly before serving, Alex was rushed, pressured, and seemingly penalized for taking even normal amounts of time. And every single time she started to build momentum, every time she began to find her rhythm and her confidence started to grow, an official would intervene with a time warning or a questionable call that broke her concentration. And if you know anything about tennis, you know that momentum is absolutely everything, because the sport is as much mental as it is physical, where you break a player's rhythm, you shatter their confidence, and you effectively take away their ability to play their natural game in what becomes psychological warfare. And according to the allegations, that's exactly what happened to Alex Eala in Abu Dhabi, where the lawsuit reportedly claims that these weren't random mistakes or unfortunate coincidences, but negligent and potentially discriminatory actions that directly and materially altered the outcome of the match. Now imagine being Mike Eala sitting in the player's box watching this unfold in real time after you've sacrificed absolutely everything for your daughter's career. You see your daughter's head drop, you see the frustration in her eyes turning to resignation, you see her fighting spirit being crushed point by point, you see the severe consequences that your statement warned about unfolding right there on the court. And most parents in that situation would scream, they'd storm out of their seat. They'd get ejected from the stadium, but Mike Eala did something far more powerful and far more dangerous to the tennis establishment. He called his lawyer, And this brings us to the absolutely massive elephant in the room issue that nobody in professional tennis wants to talk about honestly. Integrity, because Mike Eala used that specific word in his statement, and it wasn't chosen lightly when he said, they are undermining the integrity of tennis, which is an absolutely massive career-defining accusation, where he's effectively statting in language that will now be examined in a court of law that the tournament in Abu Dhabi was not a fair, legitimate sporting competition, and he's saying the outcome was influenced by factors that had nothing to do with athletic performance. Here's the uncomfortable truth that's going to make a lot of people in tennis administration very, very nervous. He might have a very strong point because we've seen controversies piling up in professional tennis over the past several years, including players scheduled for matches that don't end until 3 or 4 in the morning, creating what many have called inhumane conditions. Complaints about tournament balls being too heavy, leading to an epidemic of wrist and arm injuries among players. Electronic line calling systems mysteriously failing at crucial moments, always seeming to benefit certain players over others. And we've seen a pattern. And once you start seeing the pattern, you can't unsee it. But when this pattern targets a young player like Alex Eala, someone who represents not just her own dreams but the hopes of an entire nation. Someone who represents the future of tennis in Asia and the potential for the sport to truly become global rather than dominated by a handful of European and North American countries, it hits different. It stings in a way that goes beyond one player in one match, because here's what the tennis establishment might not fully understand. Tennis desperately needs Alex Eala because they need the passionate, engaged, social media-savvy Filipino fan base that represents arguably the most dedicated and active tennis fans in the entire world. And look at the engagement numbers when Alex plays, because when she's on court, Filipino tennis Twitter absolutely explodes. The viewership numbers spike, the social media metrics go through the roof, and she's not just good for Philippine tennis, she's good for the entire sport. So the question that everyone is asking, the question that's being debated in group chats and comment sections all over the world right now is, why would they treat her this way? And some observers, the conspiracy theorists if you want to call them that, are suggesting that the tennis establishment has an interest in protecting the old guard because they don't want the rankings to shift too dramatically or too quickly. They want familiar names and faces that European and American television audiences recognize in the finals for television ratings and sponsor commitments. So is Alex Eala in a twisted way a victim of her own success? Is she rising too fast, threatening too many established players, disrupting the comfortable status quo that benefits tournament organizers and television networks? Or is the explanation simpler and somehow even more disturbing, where it's just pure incompetence and the standard of officiating in professional tennis in 2026 is simply so poor, so inconsistent, so lacking in accountability that these kinds of match-altering errors happen regularly and nobody does anything about it because players are too afraid to speak up? But whatever the true explanation turns out to be, one thing is absolutely clear. The Eala family is not buying the standard, "oops, sorry, these things happen" excuse anymore because they want accountability. They want the decision reviewed and potentially reversed. And even if that doesn't happen, they want the entire world to acknowledge the injustice, to see what happened, and to demand better. The reaction to this lawsuit has been instantaneous, overwhelming, and absolutely explosive on every social media platform, because over on X, which you might still know as Twitter, the hashtag #JusticeForAlex started trending within minutes, and is currently trending #1 in the Philippines and #3 in the United Arab Emirates, while fans are flooding the Abu Dhabi Open's official Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts with thousands of comments demanding answers, accountability. An action with one fan writing, "Finally, someone with the courage to stand up to these biases, go get the mic, the whole Philippines is behind you." And another posting, "I watched that match live, it was clear, obvious robbery, Alex was winning that set until the umpire interfered and destroyed her momentum. This lawsuit is completely justified." But it's not just passionate fans who are paying attention, because we're hearing whispers, rumors, and quiet conversations that other players on the tour are watching this situation extremely closely. And think about the implications if Mike Eala actually wins this lawsuit, because if he gets a court of law to officially acknowledge that bad, biased, or negligent officiating caused measurable financial damages and career harm to his daughter, it opens the floodgates where every player who has ever been robbed by a terrible call, every player who has felt targeted or discriminated against, every player who has bitten their tongue and moved on because they felt powerless could potentially file similar lawsuits, and it could fundamentally change the power dynamic in professional tennis by forcing tournaments to implement far stricter accountability measures for officials, could bankrupt smaller tournaments that can't afford massive legal settlements, could force the tour to eliminate every human line judge immediately and move to 100% automated calling systems. And this is precisely why tournament organizers are absolutely terrified right now. Because according to sources with knowledge of the situation, there are emergency meetings happening right now behind closed doors where lawyers are being consulted, public relations firms are being brought in for crisis management, and tournament directors are asking the difficult questions about whether they should try to settle this quietly before it becomes an even bigger media circus. Issue a public apology to Alex and her family, essentially admitting fault. Offer her some kind of compensation or special consideration at future tournaments, or fight this lawsuit aggressively, deny everything, and risk dragging Alex Eala through a lengthy, messy public trial that could damage her reputation and her career even if she ultimately wins. Let's talk about Alex herself for a moment because she's at the center of this storm, and she's currently in Dubai preparing for a WTA 1000 event that she just earned direct entry into based on her current ranking, a huge achievement that should be celebrated. But she should be focused entirely on her training, on her preparation, on visualizing her matches and fine-tuning her game. Yet instead she's the center of an international legal controversy and media firestorm. And we know Alex is mentally tough as a graduate of the Rafael Nadal Academy, where mental toughness is drilled into every student just as much as forehands and backhands. She has that fight until the last point spirit that's made her so beloved by fans. But this is a distraction of absolutely epic proportions, unlike anything she's dealt with before, where the lawsuit specifically mentions that she's facing criticism back home. And anyone who follows Philippine sports media knows how intense and sometimes brutally unforgiving the commentary can be. So if she loses her next match in Dubai, critics will say she's distracted by the lawsuit drama. And if she complains about any officiating in Dubai, people will say she's become difficult, that she's making excuses, that she's getting a reputation as a troublemaker. Creating a lose-lose situation for her personally, unless her father can actually win this battle on her behalf and establish a precedent that protects her and other players in the future. So what happens next, and what are the actual concrete severe consequences that Mike Eala warned about in his statement? Because first and most immediately there's the ranking impact, where if the match in question was recorded as a loss when it should have under fair officiating been a win, Alex loses out on critically important ranking points. And in the incredibly tight race for top 30 positioning, where players are separated by just a handful of points, every single point matters enormously, because being seeded at Roland Garros or Wimbledon is the difference between potentially facing a top 10 player in the first round or having a much more manageable draw that allows you to build confidence and momentum into the second week of a Grand Slam. And those seeding points could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in prize money and, more importantly, in career trajectory. And second, there's the reputational impact, and this cuts both ways, because by filing a lawsuit against the tour, the Eala family is marking themselves as rebels, as troublemakers, as people who won't play by the unspoken rules of the tennis establishment. In professional tennis, despite its global reach and massive prize money, is still in many ways a very polite country club sport at its core, where the establishment doesn't like boat rockers. They don't like players who make noise, who demand accountability, who threaten the comfortable system. So will chair umpires be even stricter with Alex now, consciously or unconsciously punishing her for her father's lawsuit? Will tournament directors become hesitant to offer wild cards or special considerations even though she barely needs them anymore given her ranking? Will sponsors become nervous about association with controversy? Or, and this is the possibility that has the establishment most worried, will this transform Alex into a hero? Will this be the defining moment when she transitions from being seen as the sweet, gracious, humble girl next door into the Iron Lady of Asian tennis? Player who refused to be pushed around, who stood up for herself and for every player who has ever been treated unfairly. Because there's real fire in this lawsuit. There's anger, determination, and a refusal to accept the status quo that suggests the Eala camp is no longer content just to participate and be grateful for the opportunity, but they're demanding to be treated with the respect that Alex's talent and accomplishments have earned. They're demanding fairness, transparency, and accountability. We're potentially looking at a watershed moment in professional tennis, because if the Abu Dhabi Open settles this lawsuit quietly, it's an implicit admission of guilt. It's an acknowledgement that yes, something went very wrong. And if they fight it and it goes to trial, we're looking at months of discovery, depositions, expert witnesses, and media coverage that could expose uncomfortable truths about how tennis officiating actually works behind the scenes, and right in the middle of all this legal drama. All this controversy and media attention, Alex Eala has to pick up her racket, walk onto the court in Dubai in just a few days, and compete at the highest level against the best players in the world, which is talk about pressure, talk about mental toughness, talk about being tested in ways that have nothing to do with tennis skills. Let's also consider the broader implications for tennis in Asia, and particularly in Southeast Asia, because the Philippines has produced individual sports champions before, but tennis has historically been dominated by a small handful of countries, and Alex Eala represents something bigger than herself. She represents possibility. She represents the idea that a young player from Manila can compete with and beat players from traditional tennis powerhouses, and every time she wins. Every time she breaks a new ranking milestone, She's inspiring thousands of young Filipino kids to pick up a racket. She's proving that geography and tennis infrastructure don't have to be destiny. And this lawsuit, whether it succeeds legally or not, sends a powerful message that we will not be treated as second-class citizens in our own sport. We belong here, we've earned our place, and we demand fairness. The timing of this lawsuit is also significant because we're in the Middle East swing of the WTA Tour, a region that has invested billions of dollars in sports infrastructure and prestige events, where the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar are hosting major tennis tournaments with massive prize money, trying to establish themselves as major players in the global tennis landscape. And a lawsuit alleging unfair treatment at one of these prestigious tournaments is a huge embarrassment that threatens the reputation of not just one tournament, but potentially the entire region's sporting credibility. And this gives the Eala family leverage. This gives them a platform because the organizers can't simply dismiss this as one disgruntled player complaining about a bad call, since this is a legal challenge that, if it gains traction, could damage relationships worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And we should also talk about the role of social media in amplifying the story, because 20 years ago, if a player felt they were treated unfairly, they could maybe give a quote to a tennis journalist that might get picked up by a sports website. But today, within hours of Mike Eala's statement, the story had been shared tens of thousands of times by Filipino fan accounts, tennis analysis accounts, sports news aggregators, and even mainstream media outlets. The hashtags are trending, the debate is raging, and crucially, this puts pressure on the WTA, the tournament, and tennis officials in a way that simply wasn't possible before, because they can't make this go away quietly. They can't just issue a bland statement and wait for everyone to forget, since the internet doesn't forget. The fans don't forget, and Alex's supporters, the passionate Eala fan base, are making absolutely sure this story stays in the spotlight until something changes. There's also something deeply admirable about the way Mike Eala has framed this fight, because he's not just advocating for his daughter. He's explicitly talking about the integrity of tennis as a sport. He's making this about something bigger than one match, one tournament, one player. He's making it about fairness, about standards, about the soul of the sport. And that framing is powerful because it's hard to argue against, since everyone who loves tennis should want the sport to have integrity, to be fair, to reward the best players rather than being influenced by biased or incompetent officiating. And by framing the lawsuit in these terms, Mike Eala is positioning himself and Alex on the side of everyone who cares about tennis being conducted fairly. And as this story continues to develop, and trust me, it's far from over, we're going to be watching several key indicators, including whether the WTA will issue any kind of statement, since so far there's been silence from the tour itself, which is telling, as they're probably being very careful about what they say given the legal implications. Whether the Abu Dhabi Open tournament organizers will respond, since they're in an incredibly difficult position. Whether we'll see any changes in how Alex is treated by officials in Dubai and future tournaments. Whether other players will start sharing their own stories, and whether this lawsuit will actually make it to court, or if there will be some kind of settlement or mediation. Sports world loves a good underdog story, and in many ways that's what this is. It's a young player and her family taking on the tennis establishment, demanding fairness, refusing to be silenced or intimidated, and those stories resonate with people regardless of whether they're tennis fans, because they tap into universal feelings about justice, about standing up for yourself, about not allowing powerful institutions to push you around. And Alex Eala is becoming more than a tennis player in this moment. She's becoming a symbol of resistance against unfairness, and that's a powerful thing. And this story is developing literally by the hour as we're monitoring social media, watching for official statements from the WTA and tournament organizers, tracking how the tennis media covers this, and paying attention to what happens in Dubai when Alex steps back on the court. Because this is the kind of story that could change professional tennis, that could change how officiating is conducted. That could empower players to demand better treatment. Or it could quietly fade away if the Eala family is somehow convinced to drop the lawsuit, or if it gets tied up in legal proceedings for years. But right now, in this moment, it feels like something significant is happening. It feels like a line has been crossed and there's no going back, because Mike Eala has thrown down the gauntlet. He's called the officiating shameful. He's demanded integrity. He's filed a lawsuit that puts the entire tennis establishment on notice. And now the question is, who will stand with them? Will other players find the courage to speak up? Will fans continue to amplify this story and demand accountability? Will the media keep pressure on tournament organizers and the WTA, or will the powerful forces that govern professional tennis close ranks protect their own and try to make this story disappear? And we're about to find out. And honestly, the stakes couldn't be higher for Alex Eala, for her family, and for the future of fairness in professional tennis. So this is where the champions tennis community comes in, because your voice actually matters and we need to know. Do you agree with Mike Eala's decision to file this lawsuit? Is it finally time that players and their families held officials accountable for terrible calls that impact careers? Or do you think this lawsuit is a distraction that might hurt Alex's career and her reputation in the long run? Because this is a legitimate debate with good arguments on both sides, and we want to hear what you think. So go down to the comments right now and type Team Eala if you support the lawsuit and think this fight is necessary and justified, or type Play On if you think they should drop the legal action and just focus on the next tournament. Because we want to see thousands of comments down there showing the tennis world the power and passion of this community. Let the tournament organizers, let the WTA, let the officials who make these decisions see that fans are watching. Fans care about fairness. And fans won't accept corruption or bias in the sport we all love. And listen, if you want to stay updated on this lawsuit, and trust me, you absolutely do, because this story is going to have major developments in the coming days and weeks, you need to make sure you're subscribed to Champions Tennis, because we will be tracking every court filing, every official statement, every rumor, every reaction from players and coaches and officials. Will be breaking down the legal arguments, analyzing how this impacts Alex's ranking and her tournament schedule, following this story wherever it goes, and giving you analysis you won't find anywhere else. So smash that like button right now if you want justice for Alex Eala. Hit subscribe if you want to be part of this community. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the update when the WTA finally breaks their silence and responds to these explosive allegations. Because this is Champions Tennis, where we don't just watch tennis matches, but we fight for the integrity of the sport we love. We stand with players who are treated unfairly. We demand accountability from officials and organizers. We believe that talent and hard work should determine outcomes, not bias, not incompetence, not corruption. So until next time, keep your eye on the ball, keep fighting for fairness. And maybe keep your lawyer on speed dial, because in professional tennis in 2026 you might just need one. Because this is a story for the ages and we're just getting started. Team Eala or Play On? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video with more updates on this absolutely incredible, explosive, potentially sport-changing story.